All
Yeah,
right.
I'm
Well,
ready to go.
you're ready. All right. Well, I would like to welcome everybody to the iJIG Lunch and Learn for September 20th, 2023. Today we have a presentation by our own Gregg Hadish, who is going to be discussing accessing the Iowa Map Services and web applications focused on our ortho server hosted at Iowa State. But I think he's going to be talking about a wide variety of topics. Just a reminder that we are recording these lunch and learns and we will make them available on the iJIG YouTube. I'll also send out a link in the next few days with a link to this video. And Gregg told me that he has some supplementary PDF information with links that he's going to be showing here today. So we will be sending that out. There is a chat. If you have questions during the presentation, feel free to put them in the chat, or when there's a pause, I'm sure Gregg would entertain them anytime. Guessing. If you're not comfortable speaking or don't have a microphone, just feel free to put it in the chat and I will pay attention to that. So with that, I will turn it over to Gregg.
All right, thanks, Micah. Yeah, we're going to take a fairly broad look at not only services that you can look at through web applications, but also how do we use that within a desktop GIS environment, and particular focused on what's available in Iowa. We happen to have a wealth of services here in Iowa. This has been going back to a project we started back in 1999. Actually, we collaborated with, well, it was NRCS, which is the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service, MIT and Iowa State University to put together some of the very earliest web map services really in the country at that time. So it's been a long we've been doing this a long time. And so I'm just going to touch on several different agencies that have data out there and how you might use those within your GIS environment or through, like I said, web applications. So again, Micah mentioned you can get a copy of this with all these links on here, but just to touch on some of the major ones here in Iowa where data is available. I've got listed here. So we're going to talk a little bit about Iowa Geographic Map Server, which is the Iowa State server, some stuff from Iowa DNR, which is kind of tied in closely with the Iowa Open Geospatial Data, which is a portal to access different data. Some really cool stuff that Iowa DOT has out there in terms of their data portal and also the services. And then look at one that's not just specific to Iowa, but covers the entire country, which is the Web Soil Survey. But I'll hopefully have some time to demo how you can access soil maps for anywhere within your project area. So what we're really after here, what sort of is behind the scenes of all this, the maps themselves and the applications and everything are the either ArcGIS REST services or OGC, which is the Open Geospatial Consortium. They're the entity that writes the specifications on how this data is delivered through the internet. So things like the WMS and WFS specifications are all part of that. So it's really the URLs that you'll need if you want to use this in your GIS. So I'll be talking today primarily about ArcGIS Pro, but also the same is true for other desktop applications like QGIS. I've got a few slides related to that as well. So that's kind of what's behind the scenes of all these services. And then also I'll have links here to a couple of curated lists. Some folks put together that lists servers from all over the country, counties, cities, state, federal, those types of things. So you'll be able to access those as well. All right, just to get started on kind of an overview of what does a portal look like, the open data sort of concept. Here's the Iowa DOT has a really good example of that in their Iowa DOT open data. You can explore different web applications that they've put together and also the data itself. There's a lot of cool interactive maps. They pull together loads and loads of information, obviously related to transportation infrastructure, but also live data, things like snow plows, those kind of things are also accessible through their portal. So just to kind of drill down a little bit through that, you could, if you're interested in a particular data set that you'd like to use locally or within one of their applications, is you can search everything they have online. And in this case, I've got a bridge point locations you can drill down to and either download data specific to an area, or you can filter it, or as we'll see here in a minute, you can also pull it into a desktop GIS. So I mentioned what's behind the scenes of all this are REST service directory of all the different services that they have out there. So in the case of the DOT server, this is that list here of the ArcGIS REST services. So if you were to click on one of these, you can drill down a little further. So here for bridges and structures, that particular map service, you get some more information. It'll provide some metadata related to that. But also within here, you can, if you want to launch this right into either like a JavaScript browser viewer of some kind, or you can open this directly up in either ArcMap or ArcGIS Pro just by clicking on these links here. So that structure, that the REST service directory really provides a nice way of looking through everything an agency or organization is serving up. So again, I'll have links to these URLs. So it's really, the URL becomes important later when we then in turn bring it into a desktop GIS. And so I've got this is a screen capture from an ArcGIS Pro session where we've added the DOT server to our project here through the catalog pane. And then you can basically it's just the same folder structure as if you had local files. You're just drilling down and finding the ones that you want to add to your map session here. So I've added all routes and bridge structures and combined it with a layer from an orthophotography layer from a completely different server. So you can combine data from multiple servers at the same time, bring them into one individual session. And then you can start actually doing stuff with the data beyond just simply looking at it. You can click on features to drill down into the attributes that are associated with those features. Some of the services, like a feature service, you can actually do data queries against. You can even export out from that as well. So you could even utilize some services within let's say, a model workflow if you wanted to. Okay, so here's the Iowa Geographic Map Server. This is the one I had mentioned, was started back in March of 1999. So it's got a long history of providing free access to free data to everyone. I should have mentioned at the beginning, everything I'm going to show you here is open and available to everyone. These are not paid services or anything like that. So again, we've got a sort of a portal into some of the different applications on that site, and then also the REST services directory. We'll look a little bit closer at some of these as well. So any of the, if you're looking for, say, any of the 2020 LiDAR derivatives, those are all hosted on here as image services or map services. Orthophotography, going back to some of the very early USDA flights from the 1930s all the way to the current, currently the 2021 USDA NAPE imagery is hosted on here. There'll soon be a 2023 version of that as well. So loads of different data, a lot of historical maps, general land office vegetation, those kinds of things are available through this. Again, look at one of the web applications. This is a web app viewer built within, essentially it's an ArcGIS Online tool that anyone who has an account can actually build these out. They've made it very simple to, if you have some of your own data or you want to pull in data from other entities, these web map interfaces are a really slick way to get the information out to the public. So in this case, it's got some of the, I've got the LiDAR information shown here in the map layers window. You've got search functions, you've got some other ability to do measurements, print maps, you know, markup maps, those kinds of things are all built into these little widgets up in here. So a nice way to, again, to get the data out there to people that are interested in it or need it for some reason. Again, another look at what are the same services that we're looking at in a web application. They can also be used in a GIS environment. So here's an ArcGIS Pro project where I've got two different synchronized map views here of the same area. So on the left, we've got 1930s era orthophotography of the Ada Hayden Park. This is in north side of Ames, where I'm at. So you can look and do some analysis, just a general reference of what have been land use changes over time. For example, if you're doing stuff related to natural resources, these are great base maps to do that sort of work. And then this is a screen capture from QGIS. So those of you out there that are doing stuff within QGIS, they're within the browser tool in QGIS, you have the ability to click on this ArcGIS REST servers and add in a new server. So that's where that URL comes in handy here. So this is the URL that you would be entering into either ArcGIS here when you're adding a new server, or in QGIS when you're adding a new server as well. It's the same URL, same sort of look and feel, if you will. You're just drilling down through these different web map layers here. And you can obviously, I think I've got a screen capture of one where we're combining data from multiple agencies as well. Okay, so the next one here is the Iowa geospatial data. This is, well, the precursor to this was the NRGIS, which is the Iowa DNR's portal into just loads and loads of data that they've published over the years. And so all of that's been migrated over into this interface where you can search through data sets, put in a search term, or pull up links that they've established in here to different data collections. If you needed the flood insurance maps, you can find that in here. Again, loads of different data sets related to well, there's stuff related to infrastructure, agricultural, natural resources, obviously, geology, all of this stuff. Again, you can look at it within one of their web app interfaces, or again, using that REST service URL. Again, that's something you could bring into your desktop GIS. So you can see the same theme kind of running here of all these different data sets that are available. Those folks have put together some really cool web applications. This one is related to elevation tools. So they're utilizing the base of all this is the LiDAR digital elevation model. And the little interface here allows you to go in, draw out where you want a cross section. So it's giving you the elevation profile over here on the left, just as a really interesting sort of viewing tool to drill down through the LiDAR data itself. Again, back end of this is the same services that we've already been talking about. And an interesting one related to elevation data within lakes as well. Iowa DNR, this is part of what they call the fishing atlas. I'm just zoomed in onto a portion of West Lake Okoboji here, and you can see the data related to the depth of the lake and so on. Okay, so yeah, I mentioned this, another QGIS screen capture here where I've combined, in this case is the colored base map of this is the 2020 LiDAR color hillshade. So this takes the digital elevation model and then essentially combine that with a 3D sort of a hillshade to give you more context of what the landscape looks like related to that LiDAR. And so I've added a couple of the DNR services to the top of that. They've got their recreation areas or Iowa parks layer here. And then this was a tree inventory data set that they have for different communities around the state of Iowa. Same type of thing here. We could look at the attribution associated with these features, same way you would do within ArcGIS itself. Then this is the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service web soil survey. Really slick interface to be able to grab soils information for your area of interest. So there's loads of different applications related to this that hopefully we'll have a little time. I could do a quick demo of this as well. But again, you set up your area of interest. Soil survey data is available for the whole country. Zoom in, have it generate the soil map itself, and then go through looking at soil attributes related to this. So if I wanted to find out if this is a good location to do buildings with basements, or if I want to look at what's the water table look like, all those things that are tied to digital soils information are accessible through this web map interface. And in fact, you can also upload your own area of interest. You can either use what's on the screen, or you can upload a shapefile of any polygon and be able to extract soils related to that. And kind of behind the scenes of one of the USDA hosted portals is this, what they call the Ag Data Commons. So if you are work with agricultural data of any kind, this is kind of the front end to be able to do search, looking for different various things on here. And I did a query here against looking at the Soil Data Access Web Service. So it lists these URLs of the web services that are associated with the soils data, the soils data. There are some web map services, WMS, web feature services, and then in different geographic projections. And then finally, as far as the PowerPoint slides go, these are some curated lists of where do you find data? Where do you get these links to these services? And a couple of really nice curated lists here that are updated on a weekly basis that you can drill down through. I've got the information related to Iowa, obviously, but you can look at servers hosted in every state, whole bunch of counties that have open data, cities that have open data. All those links are just right there for you to use, whether in an application or within a desktop GIS. So in fact, some of the ones we're looking at here today are listed here. For example, this is the DOT's REST service directory right here. And I believe they run it through some sort of a check on a weekly basis to make sure there's not any dead links or anything in there. So I think what I'll do, unless does anybody have any questions up to this point, I was going to do some quick live demos. I guess I don't see the chat window.
No questions have come through, Greg.
Okay, sounds good. So what I'm going to do, I'll just go through a few of these live and we can kind of see where it goes after that. So let's start with this. This is the DOT's data site. Oh, I see there is a message there. Can you share the list of open data? Yeah, we mentioned earlier, Micah will be posting a PDF of all the slides that I just showed you, and they're all hot linked or hyperlinked to all the sites that we're looking at here, including the link to those curated lists as well. So you see on the DOT's open data site, different applications. If you want to drill down and find data related to any of these different categories, all those things are on here. We can look at some of their interactive maps. Let's go, and this is just a general highway network one, I think, here. But again, the back end of this is kind of that whole ArcGIS Online type of a system with some really nice tabs and things that are associated with the information we're looking at. So obviously this is transportation related, but the maps are interactive. You can look at the most recent road information, which this is generally more up to date than anything you'll find out there that's kind of a national nature. So great little interface here related to the DOT's data sets. If you want to know where the farm to market roads are at, just toggle between these different, and some of the web apps that we'll look at here are very focused for a specific thing, like maybe very specific in this case to transportation, but there could be some natural resource element. The next one I'm going to show you here is much broader. That has a collection of a whole bunch of different things in one location. But again, a great way to get at the information if you need to get something quickly, web apps are a really slick way to do that. So let's go to, let's go ahead and just click on this. This is what a REST service directory is going to look like. And again, it's just simple. These are all the live web services that are available from in this case, the DOT. And we can drill down and look at what do they have under environmental, what do they have under their rail data. So that's how we're accessing these. In fact, if you want to pull in a specific map server link or a feature server link, you can do that. You're just going to use copy paste and then take that into your desktop GIS when you add your add the URL. Okay, let's go to, this is the Iowa Geographic Map Server. I mentioned this is where a lot of the older aerial photography is located, all the current LiDAR information. So in this case, again, it's using this web app viewer with widgets up here to do various things. The main one here is choosing which layers you want to look at. So it's categorized into these different chunks here. Reference map layers that you can toggle through there if you want to look at the civil township boundaries. You can turn those on. Stream center lines. There's some historical data here as well. Public lands. So some of these services are coming from various agencies and organizations. This particular one, the Iowa Public Lands, is a DNR service. The other ones here are all housed in state. Let's go to the LiDAR group here. Just turn off the photography for a second here so we can look at, again, related to the 2020 LiDAR collection. I'm sure if you've been a member of IJIC, you've heard about the LiDAR collection that's gone on. Majority of it was collected in 20 and 21, but it's the second time that we've had a statewide LiDAR collection. It was primarily funded by the NRCS, FEMA, and then IDOLS also contributed to this one. It's at a higher level than the previous one that was done back in 2007 and 2010. So it's they call it quality level 2, which is a much more dense data set in terms of the point cloud that's collected. So I'll just turn on a few of the layers associated with that. On the
While you're doing that, Greg,
Yeah.
there's a couple questions that came through. Amber, I saw your question about leaf off statewide imagery available on county websites through Beacon. If you would reach out to me directly, we can have a discussion about that. You may or may not know I work for Schneider, who hosts those Beacon sites. So, and I think that's about all the questions that have come through. Back to you, Greg.
Okay. All right. Yeah, feel free to chime in whenever you guys have questions. That's fine. So here, this is part of that LiDAR 2020 collection. This is, it's called a DSM or surface model. So in this case, we're looking at features that are not only the bare ground here, but also things like buildings, trees, and all those sorts of things to look at. And then a break line file that's for the water features. So here, again, we're back at Ada Hayden Heritage Park, and these are the water features that are there. Let's turn that one off. Public lands. And let's see, so that's what the surface model looks like, but you can also look at the bare earth looks like. So this layer has stripped away all of those above ground features like trees and buildings. So we're looking at just what's on the ground itself, which is an important layer for use in, if you were doing some work with this data in a desktop GIS environment, a lot of times this is the map, the layer that you're going to be using is that bare earth digital elevation model. Say you're using it to determine cut and fill for a project area, or you're using it for maybe you want to generate some custom contours for an area. Those kinds of things are all things you can do with this data set and this service itself. You don't necessarily have to have a local file to use against this. And I think I'll show you that here in a second when I pull up GIS here. So this is what they call a color hill shade. And you can see as I zoom in and out, the colors are going to change with whatever view frame I'm in. So just to kind of give you some context to that, the higher ground over here, east side of this map is in white. That in relation to these other features that are down on a floodplain, that's high, and this is the low spots within there. So it changes as you zoom in. So now if I want to look at just this specific area of interest, I can zoom in, and now suddenly this is the high area in relation to what I'm looking at within the view frame. And so those of you who are geology minded may like to see this. This is related to these features here. These little sort of mini hills that you're seeing are related to the Wisconsin glaciation in central Iowa. So if we pull out in a much broader scale here, you'll start to see some very interesting features appear. And again, these are glacial features that we're looking at in north central Iowa. These
Hey,
are
Greg.
morainal features here. Yeah.
A question came in that said, for the LiDAR, the bare earth ground is easy to find. Have the other returns been formed into a similar elevation model or elevation layer? I'm thinking applications to forest cover evaluation, get mid-story and canopy layers.
Yeah, so right now, the source data that was delivered as a part of this project, the point cloud does not break out the high, medium, and low veg on it. It's something we're kind of looking at to see what would it take to rerun, well, not rerun, but take those existing point cloud and do a classification of that. So the standard or base specification, which is what we have, that's the USGS base specification, requires that it includes the bare earth points, I think there's some water in there, and noise points. So there's a lot more you can do with it. In fact, you can actually download the source point cloud data for this entire data set for Iowa now. There's ways of getting at that through the USGS. You can download the tiles that you need. They're in 1 kilometer tiles. And then you can do your own classification on it. So if you've got an area of interest, let's say in one of these watersheds out here, you could download the tiles that are part of that and classify the point cloud based on if you're looking at vegetation and those kinds of things. Right now, the service that's available related to something other than bare earth is this digital surface model, but this does not, the features themselves are not classified in terms of what is this that I'm looking at. It doesn't, if you were to say, click on the feature, it's not going to tell you that this is a building footprint versus a top of a tree, that kind of thing. And it's just simply looking at what they call the first return of the LiDAR. So LiDAR collection uses laser pulses to collect the elevation information. So the first thing that it hits is called as a point comes down or a pulse comes down, is say a top of a tree or the top of this building over here. And so those elevation values are recorded, and that's what was used to come up with this map service here, is just simply looking at those first returns. But it does a great job of just visually, if you just want to visualize data, even here in the trees, these trees with white on the top here are taller than the trees that are over here, just based on the elevation value, if you will. So hopefully that answers your question. It's sort of partway there right now, but it's not fully there. a completely classified LiDAR data set could have 20 or more different categories in it. They even break out things like wind turbines now, or power lines. All those kinds of things could have its own classification if someone took the time to go in there and either manually do it or use some of the classification um, algorithms that are out there to generate that. So
Greg, there's another question. It says, is there a way to fix the color scale as one zooms in or out of the view?
well, in a web application like this, it's however the publisher decided they wanted to to set that up. There are things you can do in a GIS environment that take us a step further. We could bring in, let's say, just the grayscale hill shade like this. We can drape it over the top of orthophoto layer. Let's just turn on the 2021 ortho photos here. And then I'm just going to take the tools that are built into this interface and just like say adjust the transparency so you can see both the ortho photography there and then kind of a combination of the two things there. So you can make those kinds of adjustments. Again, within a full-fledged desktop GIS, if we're linked to, let's see if I can pull that up right now, as a matter of fact. Let's see, let's go here. So I'm in ArcGIS Pro now, and here is that service I was showing you earlier, the DSM, the color hillshade service. If you wanted to use, let's try the Bare Earth DEM service here. Initially, when this service comes in, it's an image service, it's just going to be, in grayscale. But we have control over this now. We can go into symbology, and the user could decide, well, I don't want it to display in that other elevation scheme, which was this one right here, which is elevation number 1 in the ArcGIS realm. Maybe I want to choose this other one here, and you can decide, do I want to show it for the entire data set? Like here, if I zoom out, it's going to pull up the whole state of Iowa based on this color scheme that I've chosen. You can see what the whole state looks like. Or I can go in here to go back to symbology, and I can tell it that I want this thing to change as I zoom in on it. So you can do, actually you can do it right from here. So here's the color scheme without monkeying with it at all. So these colors vary based on the entire data set. If I hit this range button here with this, it'll change it to just my area of interest. So now the colors are going to come in based on that defined boundary here. So the high and low values within that view frame. So that gives you some idea how you can work with this. If you want to even do stuff even beyond that, you can actually download these as county GeoTIFF files, and you can manipulate it any way you would like in terms of just the way stuff is displayed, or if you're running processes against it, all those kinds of things. So hopefully that answers your question there. Let's see, let's go back. We were looking at a couple of different LiDAR derivatives here. This is a 2-foot contour file here. Just one of the more common data sets that people like to use is the contour lines, just to kind of visualize better the landscape that they're looking at. Let's see. Okay, let's go ahead and we'll look at a few of the other orthophotography data sets here. Again, there's lots of different categories of data to choose from within this viewer. So if we wanted to do a comparison, let's go all the way back to color infrared layer from 2002. This is it's called a CIR, color infrared. So we can go back in time here, 20 plus years ago, spring flight. There are a few of them in here that are flown, that were collected during the spring. One that the Iowa Emergency Management folks funded for 2016 to 2018 is a spring flight as well. So we have both that, and then anything that's these newer, like these 2021 ortho photos, these are flown primarily during the growing season. This is a USDA program that's used for looking at things like crop acres and things like that. So it's based on summer type flights. But if we want to do some comparing between two data sets, you can toggle a couple of them on here. Let's find a different area that's got some variety here. I'm just using my mouse either to wheel in, or you can use your shift key and just drag a box out to define your zoom area there. And now we can go up here and we can use what's called a swipe tool, or you define which layer you want to swipe off the top of it. So over here on the left, I've got the 2021 orthophotography, and on the right, I've got that color infrared from 2002. And you can sort of see if there's any changes over time. This becomes a lot more apparent in areas of development. So if we were to, let's just look at Ankeny here real quick, where there's been a lot of development on the north side of town there. We can look at changes over time here. Again, 2021 over here on the left, and you can see all the neighborhoods going much farther north up towards the Ames here. And then on the right in 2002, still some ground left in crop production, but changing as you go there. So again, just visualization tools work great within a web application. I mentioned some other little widgets here. If you want to share this, share a layer out to someone to say, hey, go take a look at this, you can click a button and say, I want to use the current map extent and remember which layers I have turned on. And then you can just send them this little URL here to link right to where you left off. Great way to share information. And you can use a print widget as well to generate a PDF map of what you're looking at on the screen. And there's some SketchUp tools and things like that that you can mark up a map as well. All right, let's go back here just for briefly into the this is again this ArcGIS Pro session. I just wanted to show you quickly how simple it is to add this to your Pro session. So we're gonna open up the catalog, and under catalog you're going to see the maps that you've got in your project, the folders that are part of it, and there's another one here called servers. And initially servers doesn't show up here. You would just simply right click in the catalog pane and say I want to add a new ArcGIS server connection. And once you've added a few, then it automatically puts it into this own directory here. So in this particular project, I've added connection to Iowa State, the Iowa DOT, and the Iowa DNR all in the same project here. If we look at the properties of any of these, you'll be able to see how easy it was to set up. When you set up a new server connection, you just paste that URL in here that I was showing you earlier. Those you could start by pasting in the /REST services, and it automatically changes this to what it needs to operate within software. So we could go back to our view here. Go in here, I can grab, that's the URL. You're just going to do a right click, copy it back into ArcGIS or into QGIS or whatever system you happen to be using. I'm not familiar with much beyond those two actually, so it may vary. I do know that these same services can be used within CAD environment as well. So if you're using Autodesk, they have the ability to talk to these servers as well. So you can pull data in that way. So once you've entered the server in here, you're just going to expand the link here and just start drilling down through the folders. So in this one from Iowa State, I've got the ortho directory, and these are all the different services that I have access to through here. So if I wanted to look at historical topo maps, I just right click it and say, add it to the current map. It's going to go talk to the server and bring in the map back into the project. Once you go from the catalog, it'll add this into the contents pane here. And as I showed you earlier, you do have some control over this. If you initially in ArcGIS Pro, it tries to determine what's the best appearance, the stretch type to put on it. A lot of times it'll default to this percent clip here, but you can quickly change it back to none. So this is going to show exactly what the service or what the server is delivering here is the color scheme. So we can look at the older 1 to 24,000 scale topo maps here, which incidentally was one of the very first ones that we published back in 1999 was these maps. USGS had come out with a new product called the digital raster graphics, and we fed it into the MIT system, and we were able to start delivering these map services. So that's the process of doing that. I wanted to leave a few minutes here at the end if there any more questions come up by chance or anything else you want me to kind of dive into.
Nothing has come through there. There was a question that
Shoot, I just
Jamie
remembered.
had asked, and this is going back to, again, talking about Schneider's beacon sites. We would have to have a conversation with any person who wants to put stuff on a beacon site. I am always advocating some data on beacon, but it can affect performance. So the type of imagery and other statewide data layers that can be put on a beacon site has to be considered. So anybody who does have questions about those, I know Amber's already reached out to me. I encourage you to get a hold of me. And if I don't know the answer, I'll find the answer.
I just remembered one other thing I wanted to show you quickly here was the web soil survey and how easy it is to get at
good thinking.
Your area of interest. The initial map that comes up again is of the whole, well, in this case, the lower 48. Drill down, zoom in, pan. You can do searches by address if you want. If I just put Iowa, you zoom in a little further here. I keep going back to this Ada Hayden site because it's kind of a unique area in the flatness of north central Iowa here, where we have some level of topography. But for this interface, there's a button here called AOI. So if we pretend we want soils information for just this area around the park, just drag that out, goes back and hits a web feature service and says, okay, this is your area of interest. Then the next tab you go to is the soil map itself. And it's as quick as that. It's done a query against the entire data set for Story County, Iowa, and it's determined these are the soil map units that are part of your project area, your area of interest. So immediately now we've got a working list of all the soil types that fall within there. And from there, you can go tons of different directions, and that's through this Soil Data Explorer tab. So when I pull that up, I've got all of these different, either I can look at different soil things that are based off soil suitability and limitation ratings, soil properties themselves, and be able to generate information from that. Again, it's tapping into this gigantic attribute data set behind the scenes. So let's just pretend we're going to do building site, and it's going to be a dwelling with a basement. We just toggle, view the rating, and immediately it's going to deliver a map with a legend on it here, showing me what the limitations are related to the soils that are at that location, whether it's limited or not limited. So in this particular case, in my area of interest, there's only a few soils over here, or areas of this map, that were suitable based on soil properties. There are some limitations on these in yellow, and then the red would be very limited. And if you want to even go further, it comes up with a report and says, okay, the reason that this drill soil, this loam soil, was somewhat limited was because of these different elements here. So depth to saturated zone was the sort of the defining factor there. If this is all the farther you want to go, you can click a printable version here. It packages this up as a PDF. You download it and you've got a full report of all the soils, the map that goes along with it. So just a quick look at that. I thought I saw something else pop into the chat there. Was there anything
So
else?
Josh just put a reminder that if you have not joined our iJIC email list and want to receive information about future Lunch and Learns, please follow that link below. Jamie has a question for you, Greg. Have you considered applying processing templates to your image services to display dynamic views of the data set? Things like slope, aspect, heights and feet or meters, shaded relief, etc. One image service with many different views.
Yeah, in fact, that's essentially what's going on here. Especially the LiDAR related ones it's really just talking to in most cases, the bare earth DEM, and it's runs through a process. So it automatically knows, okay, to display hill shade, it looks at the little hill shade module that talks to the bare earth DEM. So it displays it in that grayscale. The only one that's not done that way related to the LiDAR is the contour layer. And that's just because it was a much more effective way to do it by building out what's called a vector tile service. So it's much speedier, it labels quicker, all those kinds of things. But in a lot of cases, it is using behind the scenes on the server side. It's going through essentially a tool to say, okay, for color hill shade, I'm going to combine something from a hill shade with a colorized DEM, and then boom, there's the result from it. Okay, any other questions? I think we're just about out of time here.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Greg, for doing this. The wealth of knowledge you have is just amazing. I'm glad you're able to do this and that we got a recording for it. That document that you put together that we'll be sending out both with the link to the video once we get it on the iJIC YouTube channel And we'll post it on the IJIC website. It's just going to have a plethora of resources. It's a great way to remind everybody all the kinds of data that's available, absolutely free, that we can incorporate into our GIS projects. Our next Lunch and Learn is going to be, I always act like I never know when this is. It is going to be October 25th at noon. And I also just want to make a little reminder that we're going to have an IJIC fall board meeting the week prior to that, October 18th. So be checking out your email and paying attention to those as that information comes through. You can, Gregg has been a member of IJIC forever, I feel comfortable saying. And so if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to reach out to him directly. Where are you going to find recordings? We will be putting this on the IJIC website, which is iowagic.org. Or we're going to be putting on a link to it. IJIC, the Iowa Geographic Information Council, does have a YouTube channel where we post all of our lunch and learns and our board meetings. Thank you very much, Josh, for the link that you just put in the chat. And there you can find all, that's where we put new, we make a playlist for lunch and learns, and then you can find all of our past. And I do encourage people to go out there and take a look at what we're getting. We're getting a nice little library of video content. And I really appreciate you guys joining us today on this lunch and learn. Thank you. And thank you, Gregg.
You bet.